Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Margot Parmenter, and I'm the events coordinator at the Hub City Bookshop in Spartanburg, South Carolina. We are so excited to have you join us tonight for a virtual conversation about Anna Hogeland's debut novel, The Long Answer. This book was published. Here it is. It's so beautiful. I just love this cover. Was published just a few weeks ago to a positive review in the New York Times and has since been garnering a lot of deserved acclaim. So we're super excited to have Anna here with us today. And she'll be in conversation with fellow author Grace Toulousan. Anna, Grace, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Before I turn it over to the authors to talk about the book, to talk about writing, to talk about all the issues that are addressed in the book, I'm just going to do a brief intro of the Hub City Bookshop for anyone watching who might not be familiar with us. The Hub City Bookshop is a full-service independent bookstore serving the upstate of South Carolina. We're part of a larger nonprofit organization called the Hub City Writers Project, whose mission is to cultivate readers and nurture writers. We do that by publishing original titles through our press, as well as by sponsoring literary programming in the community, including writers' workshops, conferences, book clubs, and author events like this one. If you want to find out anything more about us, our mission, our books, please head to our website, hubcity.org, and sign up for our newsletter. Also, if you have not yet purchased your copy of Anna's book, please know you can click the button at the bottom of the screen that says buy this book and get a brand new beautiful copy from us at Hub City. Buying the book through our shop or really any independent bookshop is the best way to shop local and support your local bookshop. One more thing, I just want to remind everybody, please feel free to ask questions. You can drop them in the chat or there's an ask a question button. And if you click on the words ask a question, it will throw up a little dialog box. Please feel free to submit your questions. We'll reserve some time at the end for the authors to answer them. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce our authors. Anna Hogeland is a psychotherapist in private practice with an MSW from Smith College of Social Work and an MFA from UC Irvine. She lives in Vermont. Grace Toulousan was born in the Philippines and raised in New England. She graduated from Tufts University and the MFA program in writing at UC Irvine. She is the recipient of a U.S. Fulbright Fellowship to the Philippines and an Artist Fellowship Award from the Massachusetts Cultural Council. She taught writing for many years at Tufts and Grub Street and is currently the Fannie Hurst Writer-in-Residence at Brandeis University. Grace and Anna, I'm going to minimize myself and hand it over to you guys.
Great. Thank you so much. Anna, are you going to start by reading?
Sure. I'll read just a really short passage, just because I think reading, especially on virtual events, can be hard to pay attention to. So I'll just do a couple minutes, but I really want to thank Margot and Hub City and Grace and everyone that's watching for making this happen. It's just such a joy to be able to talk to writers like yourself. And virtual events, I feel like obviously there's not the same kind of in-person energy, but there's so many other advantages. So I've been really enjoying just how easy it is to see you. And it feels like we're just kind of talking together, which is cool. So thank you, Margot, for making this happen. I'm going to read, oh my goodness, I left my reading copy upstairs. I just have a random copy of my book down here, but luckily I kind of know where this is. I am going to read from near the end, there are a few reasons why this passage is not a great one for me to read, but I'm choosing it anyway. It's near the end, it's in the penultimate chapter, and it doesn't contain any big spoilers. But it is also the passage in which the title is revealed. And I feel like both of those are kind of no-nos for passages to read. But I've just been thinking about this one a little bit lately. So I thought we might talk about something related to this. And the setting, just very briefly, is two women in a bar in Joshua Tree, California. And one of them is the narrator, Anna, and the other is this woman she meets named Marisol. Do you have children? I asked. Marisol drank from her beer, her eyes on mine now, appraising me like with something like amusement. I didn't know that she'd answer. It was a rude question to ask a woman over 30 with a wedding ring alone at a bar in the desert, invasive and charged, and she knew this by the way she was looking at me. I might as well have asked her age, her pant size, how much she had in savings. It felt good to ask it. She simply didn't have them, I guess, and didn't want them. Or she did have children, and they were estranged. They lived with their father in another state. She appeared too young to have children old enough to be elsewhere without some story of loss or betrayal or failure of love. I needed stories like this now. I needed them like I needed water and salt to tell me what was possible in the course of a life after the life you'd planned dies inside you. I searched for these stories everywhere, in novels and memoirs, movies and TV shows and YouTube testimonials, always left wanting. I needed them to show me how to remain intact. I resisted the urge to apologize. I wasn't sorry. I was sick of saying sorry when I wasn't sorry, and I was sick of making myself small. Marisol took a long sip of her beer and set her glass down. My father loved Stevie Nicks, she said. He would never say so, but he was always listening to her. I didn't understand. I looked at her, confused, and she gestured to the singer, who had just stepped back to the mic. Dare my wild heart, dare my wild heart. He used to take me and my brothers to Cheyenne Mountain when we were kids, she said. We'd listen to this album on the way up, and when we drove back, too. It was as if she didn't hear my question, but she did hear it. I'd seen her take it in. The song was familiar to me, too. It was playing on the radio on the way home from the surgery. Isaac and I were so tired. I wasn't in pain. He knew all the lyrics, and he couldn't explain how, and we talked a little bit about memory, sense, and songs. That was all I remember from that day. That and the blood in the toilet water, the shock and beauty of it, the tendrils falling slowly in pink and red and black. The more I listened, the less convinced I was that this was the song that had played that day. It could have been any one of hers, or Fleetwood Mac. I didn't know this song.
Hey, thank you. And I wanted to thank you for writing this book and to say congratulations, it's such a beautiful and moving book. And there's so many things I appreciate about it, including I'm really glad you read that passage because it exemplifies some of my favorite kind of moves that happen in the book, which are these moments that, maybe in real life, we try to get away from quickly, whether it's just like not polite or it's awkward in a social situation, but even internally, for myself, there'd be like subjects or things that I just feel like, oh no, that feels too sensitive to want to even be there, even with myself. And so what I appreciate about what you're doing here is taking time to stay with those moments and sit with them and to have the narrator do what was just shown in this scene, which is like say like, okay, I know this isn't, maybe this is a rude question, maybe this isn't something we should talk about, but I'm going to stay here for a minute and see what happens. And there's so much energy and it's so dynamic to me to watch that and to say like, oh, okay, this writer and narrator is going to push forward a little bit, and we're going to see what happens if people can have this conversation and sit there. So there's so many lines and moments like that just sing to me in this book, and I enjoyed it so much. It was so moving. So I want to say thank you for it. No matter what kind of relationship folks have to pregnancy and pregnancy loss and their bodies, I think there's a way that I was fully aware as a girl and then as a young woman of myself as like a reproductive being. And so even though I did not have biological children of my own, there's this way that current and that question and even threat and danger but joy too, like it was just always there in my life. And so I just appreciate that you've you've paid attention as a subject worthy of paying attention to, in not only Anna the narrator, but in the several women that you bring in to this conversation in this novel. I just said so many things, but I'm just so excited about it. There's one line I'll pull out. This is the narrator. She's talking about her sister. She revealed intimacies of Elizabeth's life I knew were not meant for me to hear, and so I listened carefully. And that's kind of the approach that I took to the whole novel. It's like there's all these stories that I'm not necessarily privy to, but that's exactly what I'm going to get, and I'm going to be able to be in the company of in your book. So I'm curious about the process of writing this particular book. Like, you and I have this common experience of both going to UC Irvine's MFA program, even though we went at very different time periods. And I was curious about if this novel appeared there or you started working on it at a different time.
Well, thank you for everything that you just said, and thank you for reading it so closely. It's such a gift. So UCI has 3 years, but only 2 years. The first 2 years are workshop, and where you submit a manuscript every month-ish, like every week someone goes up, you come up about every month and you get feedback and so on. And then your 3rd year, there's no workshop. You're just sort of living, you're teaching, you're getting paid to teach, you're getting health insurance, which is nice, but you're not like at workshop. So it's this beautiful year for writing, or can be, is kind of, that's the hope of it. And a lot of other programs don't have that. They just have the 2 workshop, and you have to kind of figure out your exit plan before you even settle into the program. So that's something I think is really appealing about UCI, is this year where you can really absorb what you've learned in workshop and then have a little bit of distance from it before you're back on the street in real life and having to, do whatever other job. So I didn't workshop this novel at all. I didn't write it during the workshop period. I did start it in that 3rd year while pregnant with my first pregnancy. But I didn't show it to really anybody. I had the first pages I showed to a couple people, but even though their feedback was so insightful and helpful, I felt very much like I wanted to write it in a really private space, maybe because of the content, but also just, you get a lot of feedback in 2 years. And I think I just wanted to see what it would be like to just have myself as my own reader, and to just not be writing for a deadline all the time, and just really have this be my little side project. And I wrote most of it in the year after I left, and I did only share it with my husband, who also went to UCI, actually, and a childhood friend of mine, so who's also a writer, but she had not been to an MFA program. She didn't have the kind of workshop. There's certain things that kind of come up over and over again that I think are worth coming up. It's not like, they're things to know, but someone who just is a reader, with no kind of, training, which I think can be a really nice thing. And so those are the only people I had read it. And it wasn't even really a workshop. It was just here's 30 pages. Is it alive or dead? I didn't really want more than that. And, usually they would say alive, and sometimes they would say alive, but not so much in these parts. And even that amount of feedback, I was like, okay, just thank you. Now I need to go do this on my own. So now it's odd because I'm having more people read it, but I'm past the feedback stage. So it feels, I don't regret the way I did it at all. In fact, the way I'm doing it for this next novel I'm working on is very similar, but I do feel like now I open myself up to this many readers, and now I don't know how many readers I have, but hopefully a few more than that now. But I don't see it there, kind of exists with the book alone in a place very far away from me now.
I think that is a brilliant thing to ask. It's very simple. Is it alive or dead? And yet, like, it encompasses so many, so many things. I mean, but that is ultimately why someone would be drawn to read a book and to go to it and to want to be in that world, is because it does feel alive. Um, so yeah, I have to think about that and like maybe think about asking for that for myself, because it's an important and simple question. And so, what struck me, it means one of the things I thought about with the book was about storytelling, and your character is named, has the same name as the writer. And there's other examples of this that I'm drawn to, like the woman warrior, and there's other examples. I just won't mention them. But how did this and anyways, maybe this is only something you can see from afterwards, but there's many ways this could have been categorized, right? It could have been like linked stories or stories, but how did you think about it? Did you try to not actually categorize it or think about that at all? Because maybe that doesn't even matter. How did you think about it?
Yeah, I really didn't think about it. Maybe I should have been, but I really didn't. I just kind of needed to exercise whatever was coming. And then I said to myself so many times during the writing, oh, I'll make this good later. And like, I'll make this something worth reading later. Now I just need to like honor whatever stream of words is coming out of my brain. But I did, even in the early stages, I did have I knew I wanted it to be a chorus of voices. I feel like anything related to women's bodies or any body, I just, also I feel like I needed it to be polyvocal. And also I was really searching at that time, even before anything went wrong with my pregnancy, for any sort of narrative around how people have survived this extremely intense process emotionally and physically. So I was really like outward looking already. I didn't have enough material inside me to make the Anna protagonist like a real, story creator. I felt like she had to be like fed by what was like the kind of drama around her and the narratives around her. And I had seen that done in, I thought, such a beautiful way with W.G. Sebald. He does it in different books, but if anyone out there has read The Emigrants, that is like definitely the model that I was drawn to. It's basically a quartet of stories, and there's a common narrator who he's more like a curator, like he absorbs and his hand is in the story, but you really feel like he kind of disappears and you're just like listening to this other person. And I loved that effect. And it was so just like smooth reading. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool if there was kind of like a feminine version of that and then like a pregnant version of that, which is, I don't think, quite possible, because there's this idea of the flaneur. I'm going on a little bit of a tangent. The flaneur is like, it's a French word that I'm mispronouncing, but basically like the wanderer, and it's a male word. And in writing, it's generally someone who just walks around cities and absorbs things around him. And there's been books written about like, can a woman be a flaneur, or can anyone other than like a kind of nondescript like cis white guy be a flaneur? And the answer is basically no, because we can't kind of disappear. Like, our bodies are more visible and more prone to any number of comments or dangers or anything. So we can't just like blend into the sidewalk. And especially a pregnant it was just like it was a flawed premise.
Or a challenge.
Who is more, yeah, sorry, what was that?
Or a challenge, like to see if you could do it, or dare, like, can I do this? Yeah.
And I tried to do it, and until it became really clear that the body of the flaneur, I think is the feminine version of it, has to become like kind of has to announce herself, because it's such an active, you're so aware of your body, everyone else is so aware of your body, and then when there's a loss or something unexpected happens, you lose the option of being just this passive, like, tell me everyone else's story and I'll kind of abandon my body and dissociate while I'm listening to you, when your body is going through such dramatic processes in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I held on to that form though, because I still was compelled by it, even though I kind of broke it open and unwillingly, just because of my fate and what I was going through. It changed course, but I decided to try to veer it back. So it does resemble the outline of that novel still, even though there's like a huge rupture, where I feel like the narration is trying to say, like, oh, you can't write a book like Sebald if you are a pregnant woman, even if you try.
I mean, I loved, I was reading it first to enjoy the stories and the different characters and the places and the people that we were meeting. And then I went back and tried to study it a little more. And I'm like, oh, she's like, these are stories that are getting told to this narrator. And yet, we're in scene and I'm with these other people, but then also seamlessly, we go back to the main narrator, and her story and what's going on there. I was also really interested in the the screenplay, the part of it, the attention to storytelling. I mean, there's this line. Sorry, I'm going to find it because it was the chapter called "No Blue," and gosh, the opening and ending line of this chapter is just like so stunning. So in "No Blue," I know what they mean now when they say they lost the baby. They mean they don't know where the baby is. And then we go to all these incredible sections and unexpected places. It's almost like a lyric essay in a way, in this chapter. And then this last line of the section, let me write this another way. It was just like, I was like cheering because I was just thinking like, oh, this is amazing. I'm so excited about what you're doing and experimenting with and what you can do in a novel. Like I love to see ways that people do challenge and push up against forms that we come to expect, and to see how moving it can be. It's incredibly moving. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, could you talk a little bit about autofiction? I mean, I hear this term. Maybe it's always been around us, but like it seems as though folks are more inclined to define it or something now. I don't know. But do you see it this is in that tradition?
I think it is, just because of some tenets of what that means. Like not always, but often the narrator has the same, at least first name of the writer. There's some biographical details that are the same. I've heard, so I think that it falls into that category, and I knew it would, and I was fine with it. I didn't really, if it felt like it needed to not be, I would have made it not autofictional, but I felt like every time I would try to change something further away from myself, some sort of immediacy or vulnerability would be threatened by that, and that was too important to me. And I felt like no matter what I did, people would assume I had a lot in common with the narrator anyway, so I may as well name her Anna. I did change the last name. She has my middle name as her last name, which is Chase, not Hogeland. But I changed everyone else's name actually, except for mine. Anyone who's like anywhere but loosely or less loosely based on someone in my real life has a different name, except for me. I mean, to your question about has this been around forever? Is this a new thing? I know that the genre has been around for as long as novels have. I feel like the first novels that I can't call to mind an example at the moment, but or sort of like travel writing. I can't think of a writer at the moment, but I think the first like novels were these travel logs of people who would go overseas and write of their account, and they were the protagonists of their own, and I'm sure of their own narrative, and I'm sure that they blended the lines of fiction and reality all the time, even though maybe they didn't even know it. I think often we do it without even knowing. The term autofiction, though, I honestly don't know if that is newer than the device itself. I do see it more, and I see these articles that are like the new wave of autofiction, and I'm always kind of confused and like, well, isn't it like the old? It's a renaissance maybe, rather than like this new trend. And I don't really know what, I've taught a class on this actually at Grove Street, where we also have in common, about autofiction, and I can never really, it kind of annoys people sometimes, I think, the autofiction genre. It seems kind of divisive. Some people are really pulled to it, drawn to it, to reading it and writing it, and some people get caught up in like, well, what's real and what's not real, and is this true, is this not true, why didn't you just write a memoir or like a novel? And I'm just sort of like not, I feel like a good story is a good story no matter what the genre. So, and I do sometimes have curiosities about that, maybe a little more in an autofiction book than something that takes place in space, but I still am always looking for like the truth, whatever that might mean. And I feel like in autofiction, you at least have the illusion of it being a lot closer, even if it is all lies. There's a lot of lies in here and a lot of not so lies.
Yeah, and and then there are times when you've published pieces. Recently in late June, in LitHub, this essay, After Two Pregnancy Losses, I wrote the book I needed to read. And what was that process like? Like, how did that feel to publish it? I mean, to write it, to stake the claim, like, okay, this is firmly essay, memoir. This is my life.
I really wanted to write that essay. I felt like I wanted to write it for writers mostly, to give another version of how a book can come to be. I feel like there are so many, and that's good, and I think we just need more and more. And I haven't really seen, which is not at all to say it doesn't exist somewhere, but I hadn't really seen anyone write about writing in a grief place or in an actively processing place, and how urgent and messy that can feel. And that is how I wrote this entire book. I don't even really remember writing big portions of it. And I was kind of I was so anxious. I wrote it mostly during the course of my third pregnancy, which resulted in my daughter, who you might be able to hear behind me. She's wandering around in the backyard with this giant sundress. And distracting me as always. So I lost my train of thought. But I just want to add to anyone who had felt any of those feelings, even if they had experienced was completely different than mine, know that you can make something out of that place, and it doesn't need to be like just a full journal. It can be like a piece of work that maybe other people might want to read. There was some conversations with my people who have helped the book come to be, like editors and agents and such, about whether or not sort of really coming out without any sort of guise of fiction and being like, this happened, this part's real and it happened to me, if that would affect the book in a bad way, if we kind of wanted readers to be like, how much of this is true, how much of this is not true. I felt not very concerned about that. My bigger concern actually was in the essay, it mentions my daughter, that that I gave birth to and had after I wrote the book and after the scope of the book ends. And I thought a lot about, like, do I out myself as now having this healthy child after writing something that's about so much about not knowing and how painful that is? And now, and I really didn't want to end the book. Sorry, anyone who's listening who hasn't read it. I don't think it's a big spoiler, but I'll just say generally, any book about loss that ends, or even just people talking about it that ends with like, well, then I had my healthy daughter and so everything was great. I like really did not want, that was not an option for me to end this book that way. And I worried that me bringing Faye, my daughter, into more of a public place would serve as an ending that I was trying to avoid. Like, oh, well, the writer got this healthy baby, and so we know that she's like okay, even though the character Anna does not know that that's going to happen to her, and maybe it won't happen to her because she is different than me. So that I did have, I mean, obviously I published it, but I was like, I don't know.
It's so interesting about like completing, the reader completing a story in their mind later, depending on whether they read, the essay or other work or not. It's like there's this ongoing story. There's the one that exists here in this novel, and then there's what the reader could complete on their own if they wanted to. I thought this essay was so powerful. And for folks who haven't read it, I definitely recommend that you check it out. And I think also it comes at I think you were writing it at a time when we learned, that about the Supreme Court decision. And so I wonder what it feels like to be writing and publishing about reproductive experiences right now. Of course, you were working on this for years before, but there is this moment that your book has come out in. And how are you doing? Like, how has it been for you?
It's been very bizarre. I feel like in some ways it's not too much different for me than any other person who feels really emotionally affected by it. It feels, well, just so the timeline is important. So the book came out, obviously I wrote it, I sold it 2 years ago. So I started writing it like 3.5 years ago. And I had my late term abortion. That was the nature of the loss of my first pregnancy in 2019. So it was not like, for this moment, although I think we also knew this moment would come maybe at some point, and then we were like, oh, it's definitely coming, and then here it is. But the book came out on June 21st, and I think the Supreme Court decision was June 24th. So it has felt mostly, I've just been really tired, honestly. Like the first couple weeks, I was just had so many emotions. Like I was excited about my book, and I knew that this helped it. Like I was seeing like this kind of gloss on it in reviews and people being like, oh, this is so timely and you should really read this now. And I felt so mixed about that. And just kind of icky, but also like, well, yeah, I do want to share this story now more than ever. So I do want the book to get out better, but I don't want to be like profiting off of this awful thing that I never planned to come together in this way. No one did, no one could have. Now and that essay came out before as well. And I've written a couple essays since then that will be published in the UK, but maybe online, so maybe can be elsewhere, kind of about what I'm talking about now, like how it feels and what we can do. And my answer is basically like, I don't really know either. So I don't have any real answers, but what I keep coming back to is that stories are the most important thing that we can be telling and sharing right now. And it isn't enough that I like wrote a book about how the law has protected me, because what I went through was horrible, but could have been many, many, many times worse, and will be and has been for so many other women in my position. Yeah, it just feels, I feel like I want to crawl into a hole and pretend it's not happening. And then I have moments where I think like, well, I have to rise and like do a little something, and all I can really do is write an 800-word article or give a little money or organize this benefit thing that we're trying to do together, which I think will be really nice, that I know aren't going to change the decision. I mean, that's sort of like, I think that those movements now are much more about solidarity and supporting kind of like people who need it right now. And the turning of the law is such a bigger thing that I can't even really get. I honestly, sometimes my husband tries to tell me what needs to happen in order for it to be overturned again. And I just like, go away. I just like, I can't. I recognize the limit of my power, at least. And it is not, I'm not on the Supreme Court. I'm not president. I can't do anything of those things.
But you are doing something, and that is, storytelling and that power is something that you're thinking about throughout this novel, but also in these essays as well. And I was pulling out like the lines from the essay that I wanted to talk about, and it's like, oh, okay, I just copied the whole essay, so like that's not gonna work. But I'm serious, like there's such powerful work in here, so you are doing something, like you're putting so much into this writing, and the storytelling and sharing your experience. And I've been thinking a lot about the role of journalists and documentary filmmakers, and just how they have impacted whether people care to bring something back to the courts or to say, oh, we do have evidence. I mean, I don't know why I've been going down that rabbit hole of like watching all these things, but at the end of some of these very tragic documentary series I've been watching, I think like, thank goodness that person did that work, that like incredibly hard work to bring all of these people and this evidence together and to call attention to something that needed attention, and then action happened. So it may feel small, but it's not. So
I feel like it needs to be, it can't just be one though. Like I think that it really is and I've been seeing this a lot, and I can't always read the stories because just where I am emotionally that day or what, but I always appreciate that they are there. And I felt this way long before, what's happening now. And I hope you don't mind me saying what I said to you on the phone about how when we met, I had just lost my baby, like, a month or two before, and maybe even less. And I read your book that is, if anyone there who hasn't read it, is like so beautiful and so powerful. And I feel like does so many things that I haven't seen written about before. It's not just one thing that I haven't, it's like 10 things that all need to be written about more that you address. And our experiences of our bodies and grief in our bodies and loss in our bodies couldn't be more different, but just the having somebody else share what that kind of pain can feel like, and the isolation. And when I was feeling in so much pain and so much isolation, it was so, I appreciated it so much. And I was sort of flipping through your book again. Here it is. I love this cover. And I realized something that I hadn't picked up on as much before, that I think we're both interested in as well, is not just how all the different ways a body can be traumatized or hurt, but also transcend that. I hope they're not, I never want to be writing like trauma porn. I think that actually hurts the cause, but also how these things affect families and relationships. And I think we both write a lot about how losses show up differently between us and our sisters. and our mothers, and how some of us get it worse than others, and other members of the family have more severe than the other, and it's just, I find that to be like endlessly complicated and fascinating, just like, again, not only what is happening in the body, but how that affects all of your relationships. It's not just something that happens to you in isolation. Even if you feel isolated, it impacts everything around you.
I mean, that's what I saw in your novel was, I mean, it's something that I had felt like when I would talk to my female friends and they had a pregnancy or a loss, or they were thinking about starting the process of getting pregnant, like all of those things, it would surprise me. It wasn't just like, oh, we're chit-chatting about our lives and sharing about our lives. No, like actually it would, depending on how I was feeling. I mean, even now I feel it. When people have changes in their lives around this, because there probably is still a part of me that wants that for myself. And when the way that you write about that in this book, I just thought like, oh yeah, I haven't seen that before, of like how our conversations with each other, a phone call, taking a walk, spending time with another friend, and it's like what she's going through with her body can have such a big impact on ours. And I was trying to think about if that happens with men, but I was like, no, just like focus on this, because that's what this is paying attention to, which is really incredible to think about, these ways that we are in relationship with each other. We're not just alone having this experience in our body, but the changes in our body impact other people, even if we don't speak about it and it's just happening, like someone's losing weight or someone's gaining weight or gaining muscle or whatever, having gray hair or deciding to color, all that stuff, like it seems very related to like what someone else may decide to do. So it's so relational. I was thinking about your work as a therapist and how that works with writing. And like, I mean, you'd said something earlier that made me think about, oh, okay, you have all these skills in working with your emotional self, or your, being pretty aware, I think, of yourself as a emotional being, and taking care of yourself. And I just wondered about how that, how those two things work together for you.
Well, they really haven't been lately. So I feel like when I wrote the book, maybe a little bit better than they are now. But the taking care of myself and being aware of myself emotionally has really taken a nosedive in the past couple of years. Just all the normal things you would expect, like pandemic and baby, and feeling very isolated in that in a very different way than not having one. But I feel I recently closed my practice, actually, before the book came out, and I was going to wait to see how the book was doing and my husband's job, how that was going, how much money he might get, and a couple other factors that any sensible adult would have waited to figure out before they closed the primary source of income for their family. But I just could not sustain being on so much of the day, as we didn't have any very little childcare. So I was, with my daughter for many, many hours, and then going straight to therapy, which is, intensive clinical work, and then writing, like not writing at all, just being so exhausted and getting frustrated with it, and wasn't eating very much, wasn't exercising, just like really had slipped into something that I didn't recognize as myself very much. And so I really wanted to crawl back to, I knew I could never go back to what life was like before, and I don't want to, but just some sort of solid ground where I can be in touch with at least like my hunger cues again. Like, am I hungry? What do I want to eat? Am I sleepy? And honor them also. So I feel like now that I have closed that practice, which I couldn't do for also logistical reasons, but I feel a little bit more human. Like I read a book the other day, like a hard copy book, which was amazing. Like I haven't read a hard copy book. I probably read 2 or 3 in the last couple of years. And I used to read, constantly. So I feel like I'm getting to a better place now. But at the time of writing the book, I was also a mess. So just in a different way. I mean, I was so anxious with this 3rd pregnancy. I was anxious with the first 2 as well, even when I didn't know I had reason to be. So by the 3rd, I was just fully, walking in a dream. And it was the longest, not 41 weeks of my life getting through that pregnancy. Every day was like, I'm so grateful to be pregnant, and why the longer I'm pregnant, the harder it's going to be when I lose this baby. Like I just couldn't kind of really believe it was going to work this time. But I was able to, I structured my day really intentionally around what I had finally learned that I need about myself, which is every day I in order to feel somewhat human, I need to read something, write something, and move my body. It doesn't need to be like fully exercise, but like something moving my body. And now I don't do any 3 of those things. So that's why I'm like, not in my best place. But I would walk in the morning. I would allegedly write. I don't really remember that. And then I would go to see my clients, and then I would read. And that is how this novel was written, was a day structured like that. And I hope that with more daycare, which I just got like a week ago, that I will be able to have another version of that, and find some, I think you use the word balance, or like find some, maybe not balance, but at least a sustainable situation.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm thinking of a chemistry metaphor, but I don't know enough about chemistry. So,
well, it's so wise. It's like your question about this manuscript when you were working on it, and you asked folks like, is it dead or alive? But just having these like 3 things to think about, like what do I need, and then to start there, and then because it is so important to feel like ourselves, and to figure out like, what do I need to feel like I am myself. And so many things have been stressful and destabilizing the past couple of years. And to me, sometimes when I hear the news or watch the news, I just think, what is this real? Like, what am I living in right now? Because it's so abhorrent to me and scary, and it's it's hard to take. So, but I think having things like that is it's important. And I'm really glad that you did these big things that are really ways of taking care of yourself and your family, even though it might not seem like it, like maybe at first, like on a financial level or something. But there's other things that are very, very important, for you and your family. And you can find ways to make money and make all of that other stuff happen. But like, there's other important things that are harder to grasp onto and hold.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about intuition the past couple of years, and how I think that's really what I'm talking about. Like, not with the writing, especially, like, is it dead or alive? Like, I already knew the answer. It's okay. I was looking for confirmation that my intuition was, what I was feeling was being, as a writer, was being felt by the reader. And the first couple times it was confirmed by these people that I trust so much. I really just stopped asking. And when they said, well, it is alive here, but like, I did sort of like space out around here. Like, I don't know why, but like, it just sort of lagged for me. And I was like, yeah, I know. I already knew, like I had felt, because I had felt it writing it. And I just got a little more confident, not as a writer necessarily, but just in terms of my own reading of my writing. Like if
That's
I
great.
was spacing out reading my own writing, something's wrong. Even if I'm looking at the paragraph and I'm like, seems fine. Like, I don't know what workshop would like, I don't see them like pecking it to death, but I got bored reading it. So even if I can't tell what's wrong with it, it just needs to go. And I used to really work on those passages and try to make them alive. And lately, maybe because of time and lack of sleep and food and all the essentials, I just delete it. Like I just don't, if it's not alive really at the beginning, I just delete it. And 90% of the time, it's better without it at all. And it's not to say nothing goes without revision. Everything goes with revision, but it has to be alive from the beginning and then I can make it better. But if it comes on, just dead and slow and everyone's like spacing out at that point, then I think it's just, I used to have this document that was like it was like a graveyard or like the coma document where I'd put all these paragraphs that I thought were maybe okay, but didn't fit, but I didn't want to lose them because I was proud of like this one metaphor I had come up with. And I'd put them in this corner of my computer and tell myself I would come back to them. And I, of course, never, ever, ever did. So I just stopped doing that completely at some point. I just like fully delete and just
Wow, that's
say
great.
goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah. I just moved recently and maybe it's like, decluttering the closet or something like, am I really going to wear this ever again? Or am I going to keep moving it from place to place? Or like what you did, which is just say, no, I'm not. So goodbye, like
It really is like a Marie Kondo writing style. It's like, does this spark joy? No, yeah. We don't need to know why. It's just like, we're not getting that feeling. And so we honor it. And I think Marie Kondo could be applied to like any part of life. I'm a huge fan of hers. And I think she's about intuition as well. I think there's a bigger cultural movement around valuing intuition more that I've been benefiting from and really seeing how it's just, you can't really go back. Once you start to live more intuitively and trusting your intuition more, I think being put back into a place where you're having to follow someone else's schedule or logic of something is, to me, feels like a complete non-option at this point. And I might have to at some point just for financial reasons, but I hope I'm going to try not to for as long as possible.
And I think that's a wonderful thing to model and teach and live too. Like it's perhaps contagious, even like other people could start. Yeah. Because there's so many, I think we suffer with what I should be doing, where I should be in life. Other people are doing it this way when like, okay, that's fine for them, but what about my life? Like no one else is living it. So what's going to make sense for me? It doesn't really matter, all that other stuff.
It is very contagious. Even when I started my practice, and I know we're running out of time, so Margot, jump in whenever you need to, but I went from a group practice to a private practice, and I felt really bad about doing that for a while. And then after I moved to my private practice, all my clients started quitting their jobs and going into better situations. And they said it wasn't like because of me, but they were like, that it didn't hurt, like watching somebody do that and then seem better afterwards. You're kind of like jumping off the plank and you're like, actually, it's kind of nice in here. Like, why don't you all come in? And I knew closing my practice was not easy for me, just because of the relationships I had built with some of these people for years. And I also knew that it might possibly give some of them permission to leave something of their own, and because they knew why I was doing it. They knew I was doing it for writing and for my family, and they all have these other passions for themselves too. So I hope they got that message as well. Hi, Margot.
Hi guys. It looks like everyone's being kind of shy. There aren't questions in the chat. But I do have a question, and I've been trying to sort of think about how to formulate it, but it sort of relates to what both of you were just speaking on, which is kind of, and something that, came up in the book and in conversations about the book, just sharing these stories, talking about these things. I feel like it's an internally tension thing to share some of these stories. A lot of the time, with miscarriages, that's something like culturally that we struggled as a society to kind of talk about. And of course, it's like a sensitive topic. But now, with the way the world is changing, having the stories there makes it feels sort of more urgent, or feels more necessary to have these stories that tell us, as your book says, like about what is possible for a life. I just wonder what both of you think about that, like, how we navigate now sharing stories surrounding reproduction and surrounding our lives. And because of course, on the one hand, there are these ways that it can make other people feel things we don't want them to feel, but other times it's just really necessary to kind of make it, maybe pave the way for other people to share their story. So I don't know, how do we navigate that?
I'll just say briefly that I feel like, just in my own experience, whenever I have talked about what I have been through, even before I was writing the book, sharing with anybody, and now having the book and kind of hearing people's responses to it, discomfort isn't the response that I've been getting. It's people being like, let me tell you what happened to me. It's like this, like, it's like they've been waiting for this permission that I find really, really sad, because it and I felt this very much, like, it's not my choice to not talk about these things. And even when I was pregnant, and like my first pregnancy, before anything was wrong, I was like, I want to talk about being 4 weeks pregnant and how weird this is, and exciting, and I feel awful, all the things. And it was very clear that I was not supposed to do that. And I was like, well, this isn't my choice, and it's not my choice to not talk about these harder things that I've been through. But I definitely feel like it's almost every time I share something, it's greeted with like 10 stories back. And I love kind of imagining that, exponential growth. Like, I love the idea of book clubs where they read the book and then they get together and they don't talk about the book at all. They just talk about their own stories and what they're going through. And that's like my dream.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I was taught very explicitly not to talk about lots of things. And so I've been like, over my life and in writing and in teaching and in talking to people, it's like I test out, like, oh, what would happen if I told this story or that story? And the horrible thing and the punishment that I imagined that I would get, it doesn't happen, knock on wood, so far. And there's been much more of a benefit to telling. And then because often other people tell too, and then we're not like, imprisoned by this fear that something bad is going to happen to us. And then we're connected to each other in a real way. That's not just like the self that we're going to portray publicly.
It's in the room anyway. I think that's the thing. It's like, it's already in the room for so many people. And so then when it's spoken, it's like the white elephant has been addressed, and it feels so much better, more real.
Yeah. I love the idea of books, and this book in particular, this beautiful book, as like silence breakers, and just opening up a world where the people don't feel repressed and feel that they can share with each other. So I really hope that happens. I'm sure it already is. I want to thank both of you so much. This was such a wonderful conversation. It was really a privilege to be able to listen in. We have the books here for sale. We have the books here at the shop. We have the book online. And anybody who really enjoyed this conversation, has friends, other people who weren't able to maybe make it tonight but might still want to watch, it will live here at this link, and it will also live on our YouTube page over at Hub City. So if you have people you want to send it to who are interested in the book, please do that. Anna, Grace, a big thank you to you guys, and I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, afternoon, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, take care. And buy this book.
And this one.
See you all.
Bye.
Bye.